Hello and welcome to another MovieBooster.com virtual pubcast. I'm your host, Ken Eggman, and I'm joined by Hawk Ripjaw
Hello.
and Bill Leon.
Yes, hello.
And we've got some interesting new movies to discuss this week. However, before we get into that, Hawk, you wanted to give your thoughts on Ready Player One since you've seen it now.
Yeah, I finally saw it after not being super excited about seeing it. I kind of just didn't really care all that much for some reason. I don't know why, but
This is unrelated, but I have a friend who his and my taste in films do not match up at all. And he saw it and he was like, "Bill, you should see it. You'd like it." And I'm like, "Ooh, I don't know if that's if that's like a good recommendation for me."
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, a friend of mine really wanted to see it, and we finally got around to being able to see it, and it was pretty good. I think it took a while for me to warm up to the movie, not because of any preconceived biases against the movie. It's just
you've read the book, have you not?
I have not. In fact,
okay.
The part of the reason that I didn't really want to see the movie is that I have heard one thing I consistently hear about the book is that the best part about it is that the audio version is narrated by Will Wheaton. That's the apparent best part about the book. Is that Will Wheaton narrates the audiobooks.
Don't get me wrong, Will Wheaton's cool, but
somebody said Will Wheaton was the best thing about something. That's
well, I mean, and exactly, that puts it into perspective. Is that if the best thing that you can say about your book is that the narrator is good, then it implies the book is not very good. And I've read this multiple times.
Yeah,
the book is apparently horrible. The book is just a nonstop chain of references, like and then Deadpool jumped out and punched Freddy Krueger in the face, and then
okay, so I there were people in a Facebook group I'm in sharing like excerpts of the book, and it made it seem like that's all the book was, but I'm willing to give it the benefit of the doubt.
So I guess what this kind of leads up to in regards to that is that Felix recommended that I read the book because having read the book, she actually felt that the movie was a very poor adaptation of it. So I'm reading the book now to see how that compares because I've actually heard a lot of different things. So digging a little bit further, some people have said that the movie was a very poor adaptation of the book. Others have said that the movie improves on the book significantly.
Yeah, I've heard more of that opinion of it.
Yep. Yeah. Same here.
So
the main thing I've heard is that it improves on is the complaint that everyone has is that it doesn't spam references near as often.
Well, there's a difference between reading a book and watching a film is that you can just put those references in the background and they're just there visually, and it's not a wall of text explaining shit. You know what I mean?
That's a good point, because in the movie, H jumps into the air and shoots Freddy Krueger in the chest. But you don't need a half a paragraph of exposition in the book to describe that to you, because you just see it as a film. But I've heard a few people say that the book or the movie does a few things that disappointed them in terms of what the book did with that same situation. Like the book handled it better. That remains to be seen. I've only read about 10 pages of the book because I bought it this morning, but I'll keep reading it and I'll let you guys know.
The last thing I read at length was the Channel Awesome Google Doc. So I haven't read a book in like a decade.
But the Channel Awesome thing was like a week ago. So,
but it was long and I read all of it. So
that's fair.
It's just a feeling of pride I have in myself. No, I'm just kidding.
As far as the movie, it took about half of it for me to really warm up to it, because I wasn't super invested in it, mainly because in the movie the dystopian environment was really unconvincing and kind of half-baked, and Ty Sheridan was just awful as the main character, and I think that's owed partly to the fact that Wade Watts is a really boring and bland character, and you can't really pull a good performance out of a character that's kind of shitty.
He's meant to be like the avatar for the reader, right?
I suppose. But it doesn't really make him compelling at all.
Just because he's supposed to be an avatar for the reader doesn't mean that the avatar has to be completely dull and unlikable.
Right.
It's the same problem with Twilight, is that Stephanie Meyer wrote Bella as a a blank slate for the again, an avatar for the reader. But you can't make an avatar for the reader and make them a blank slate that they just impress themselves onto, because they have nothing to relate to besides the fact that, you know, the main character is single.
I think you mean to say imprint themselves onto, a la Jacob.
Yeah. So, you know, you need to make your character a little bit more, give him a little bit of fucking character is what you got to do. But again, it's really hard to relate to Wade Watts or even find him interesting, because again, he's just the nerd fantasy character, which brought me to my frustrations with the romance of the movie, where it takes an extraordinarily short amount of time for the main character and the love interest to become interested in each other. And again, I was kind of disappointed in Steven Spielberg for that element, because I think he's very good at implementing this sort of nuance, even in an 80s style film, making it a little more whimsical than the very boring, basic way that it was handled in this movie. So again, there were a lot of the things in the first half of the movie that really disappointed me, but right around probably the part where they go into the Shining was where the movie really got good for me. And from that point on, I was totally on board and I had a really good time.
You know, there are a lot of individual moments in the film that I found really impressive. I just didn't think it held together as a whole. And there were a lot of appeals to,
nostalgia.
Yeah, exactly. Nostalgia that are not really all that necessary or particularly interesting. And nostalgia isn't in itself a great thing. Nostalgia exists because people really like something, and I don't know. I mean,
it's references for the sake of references. Like, I don't really. I mean, in the race where King Kong appeared, I was like, oh, that's cool, but like, who cares? I don't have nostalgia for King Kong.
Is it modeled after?
I have nostalgia for King Kong, but then I watched the original when I was a kid. So,
well, here's the kind of questions when I hear this. So, King Kong in the film, visually, is he modeled after the original 30s King Kong? Is he modeled after Peter Jackson's King Kong? Like, I mean, is it specific?
So like, immediately you think of Peter Jackson's.
Okay, so
there's not a stop motion quality to it.
What I'm saying, if it was modeled after the 30s King Kong, it would have a very distinct look to it. The eyes on the original King Kong were like very round and kind of bulgy.
It's definitely more of a Peter Jackson King Kong. I mean,
okay.
Actually, if somebody watched this movie and had no idea that King Kong existed, they would say, "Oh, that's a giant monkey, I guess."
Right. Does it look okay? This is a difficult question. I don't know how long ago you saw the film.
I don't know, 50 hours.
Does it resemble Peter Jackson's King Kong or Kong Skull Island more?
Probably Peter Jackson.
Okay.
Maybe it's the size of Skull Island. It looks like a giant monkey. I mean, there's nothing distinctive about the character other than the fact that you see it climbing in a building. You're like, oh, I guess that's King Kong.
Mm-hmm. See, that's kind of the thing about me and my enthusiasm for seeing Ready Player One is that I'm more interested in seeing how they do the references and how they handle them. I really could give a shit about the story and the characters.
Well, I mean, it's good. There isn't much of either of those.
I'm in
Kong, but that was a bad example. The King Kong.
If I watch this film, it'll probably just be for fan service, and it'll probably just be because they put the fucking Iron Giant in the trailer.
And the Iron Giant actually gets a pretty decent amount of screen time. It's not just a passing reference. It's
nice.
It factors heavily into the final battle, which I thought was pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
I think that. I lost my thought. Oh, T.J. Miller plays a character in the movie, and he is awful. Yeah, it's a really terrible character. Like not because of what T.J. Miller has been doing, but just like he plays a character whose name I can't remember. But he's a super badass looking guy with a skull.
He plays like an online assassin, basically.
Right, but he talks like a 18-year-old kid who's been doing nothing but playing a video game for the past 10 years.
Which I think to an extent was kind of like the thought the mindset behind it.
Oh, totally. I mean, it's funny because you got this badass looking character who looks evil as hell, but when he talks, he's just
TJ
kind of this fucking teenager, it's a pretty silly. I like the concept, but the way that the character was performed and written just didn't work at all.
Right. Yeah, it didn't work as well as I think they would have wanted it to.
Yeah. But again, I think that one of the best parts was the Overlook Hotel segment, which was terrific. This is one thing that really, really specifically bothered me. The script as a whole was really bad, but one thing that really like jumped out at me, and I talked about this with my friend after we saw it, is when Wade goes to the curator. He's like this. The curator is this keeper of all the memories of the creator of the game. And the curator's like, "Oh, you're here again to waste my time." And they're walking through the memories of the creator of the game, and the creator and the curator. I'm getting creator and curator mixed up. The curator is talking about how these memories are shown visually. Do you remember that, Ken?
Yeah.
He's like, "Oh, every memory is a composite of different this and that, and then presented into a 3D image for you to see." And it's like, well, okay, if Wade has been here multiple times and enough times for the curator to be irritated at him, bothering him again, why is the curator describing this process that Wade already clearly knows how it works?
So yeah, there are a lot of strange inconsistencies about that. Actually, something that's sort of tacitly related to that. Tangentially related, rather, is something I heard mentioned on like a video game podcast that I listened to, and what they said was the probably the biggest flaw behind this movie and the entire plan is that in real life, if this was like a real thing, gamers would have solved the mystery within literally.
Yeah, completely like that's I chalk that up to just get over that hump. It's fine. And I haven't seen the film, but that does like
one of my favorite things that they pointed out was the fact that the first one that has apparently never been solved is this race and
to drive backwards.
Right, and when he does that, you're like, "Oh, nobody thought of that before."
And when you think about it, though, hardcore gamers, if they're trying to find Easter eggs, literally one of the first things that a hardcore gamer will do in a driving game is try to break the game by going the direction they're not supposed to go.
I don't see this product, the book or the film. And again, I don't have experience with either, but from what I've heard and just sort of how they've marketed each, it's all about the fan service. And that, I don't know, is that what this is? Is this just a bunch of references?
It is fan service, the movie. Yeah, I don't think there's any debating that. Okay. And I don't think they're even trying to hide that fact. What do you think, Hawk?
No, they're not. It's not ashamed of that at all. It does, and that I think again, that's why I had such a big problem with the first half of the movie, because that's all it is. And then you get in the second half, and it's a little bit more of a Spielberg, action adventure. It's got more life to it. It's got more meaning to it, especially when you get into the finale, which I thought was genuinely touching. Especially with Mark Rylance as I'm going to start saying the creator of the game and look up his name. It was
Jerry Funko Pop.
Halliday.
Jerry Buttafuoco. What?
Jerry Buttafuoco, as Andy Dick would say on news radio.
Oh, he didn't say Buttafuoco.
I know what he said.
It's like James Halliday or something like that.
That's it. That is it.
And his like the whole movie was kind of bugging me. I was like, oh, who is that? And it's like, it's Mark Rylance, and it's a really good performance. And I really loved everything about him. He's kind of awkward, kind of strange, but so easy to love. Because
I've heard a few critics reference Mark Rylance as Steven Spielberg's new secret weapon.
Oh yeah, and that's
no doubt.
I would completely agree with that, because Mark Rylance is just damned good, and he was sort of an undiscovered secret until relatively recently.
Mm-hmm.
because he really didn't appear in too many films. He was more of a stage actor.
I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but his Best Supporting Actor win last year was quite a surprise.
It was a couple years ago for Bridge of Spies, wasn't it?
Was it a year or 2 years ago? I don't remember. I never saw
2016.
Okay, I never saw Bridge of Spies.
I mean, it's good. And Mark Rylance is a good actor, and he's one of the best parts of this movie because his character, a whole lot of Halliday's secrets of what people are going to find feed into Halliday as a person, and it funnels towards what the point of the movie is making, which I thought didn't really feel as ham-fisted as I thought it was going to. I knew where the movie was headed, but it was very elegant in how it handled that message.
Mm-hmm.
Before you wrap this up, Chris, Hawk, sorry, let me know when you're going to wrap this up. And then, because I think I have an interesting, I have an interesting counterpoint to.
I just have two more things on it. One was, Ken, do you know if this was shot on film?
I have no idea.
So the live action sequences did have a 35 millimeter look to them, and I wasn't sure if that was a post-production effect to make it look like the old films, or if Spielberg actually went for the full deal by filming the live action sequences on film.
Well, that would only make sense. I mean, if I were a filmmaker, I would definitely make the decision to film digitally for the stuff set in the one, in the world of, according to Garp, whatever.
I think I'm more on the cynical side of things, and I think Red Letter Media was, in their review, brought this up. Steven Spielberg was probably on set for all the live action stuff, and then all the CG stuff was probably like sent to his phone, and he Skyped in and said, "Yeah, this is fine." Like I hate to be that cynical about it, but that's
see, I would believe that if the stuff taking place in there wasn't good, but I thought it was actually the stuff that took place in there was in many cases the best stuff in the movie.
Do you think he could have accomplished that over Skype though, Steven Spielberg?
I mean,
I'm just playing devil's advocate here.
Yeah, he is Steven Spielberg, so
yes.
And I will say this is not his most challenging movie he's ever made by any stretch of the imagination.
No, it had some good. That's one of the things I liked about the last act, though, is that there was a mix of action sequences in both the digital and the real world, and all of it looked pretty good. Mm-hmm. Especially the villain, played by Ben Mendelsohn, of course. He has like this henchwoman sidekick who is just like a force of nature, just kill first, ask questions later. And there's a great fight sequence with her inside this van with all the characters, and it looks really good. So there's a lot of excitement in that last act. So they're definitely again, you say it's not Spielberg's most challenging film, but there's still a lot of passion there.
Yeah,
there's plenty of classic Spielberg films that are not challenging.
I guess the question is, can you even challenge Spielberg anymore?
I think maybe an underrated or not talked about enough or appreciated enough Spielberg film is Catch Me If You Can.
Oh yeah, that's definitely a.
What's challenging about that? It's just a fun movie.
I think the challenge. I guess the
challenge, maybe morality. I guess, yeah,
engaging.
Yeah, but he makes you like Leo helps.
I'll give you this. The challenge is he makes a person who is just morally corrupt in every way likable.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you root for him.
You genuinely root for him. That's a challenge.
Oh yeah.
That takes a lot of work to make keep that balance.
Leo DiCaprio as a performer does some of the work as far as Frank Abagnale in Catch Me If You Can is concerned. Mm-hmm. But again, like that's one example. Like E.T., this what's challenging about. Well, I guess you're right. Oh my God, I'm so wrong. I'm sorry. I just had an epiphany.
Yeah, I mean, I think you for a moment there you confused you confuse challenging from a filmmaking standpoint with
overly intellectual. I think is what I confused it with. And yes, you are right. Yeah. Also, I was thinking of Raiders. Is Raiders really that challenging, or is that just a fun movie?
I would say, I mean, from a filmmaking perspective, I would call it. I would say that it was probably a very challenging film to make because
So I meant
moving
challenging
parts.
to the audience, challenging as you watch the thing. You're being challenged by what you're watching.
Challenge the viewer, maybe not, but I think if you watch it now as opposed to when it first came out, you can appreciate it as how it was really a trendsetter for adventure films.
Now,
right.
I also don't want to get on this challenge thing and say that challenging the viewer is all you need to do as a filmmaker.
Which, no, absolutely not.
Yeah, that's not. I mean, I definitely don't want that to be communicated. Being a challenging filmmaker and making challenging movies, I would say, is a great bonus, but it's not the only thing. There's a place for other filmmaking.
Right.
Anyway.
The last thing I want to say about Ready Player One is that it treated a couple of plot twists as though it was supposed to be surprising to me.
Okay.
When I absolutely was not. For example, the character of H.
Okay. He was on all that heroin,
It took me about 20 seconds to think, I bet that's probably a girl. It's probably a female.
Oh, yeah. Well, the fact that
they
gave him such a consciously, computer-enhanced manly voice, it was like, yeah, this is going to turn out to be a chick. I mean,
and then they treated it like this huge reveal. I'm like, yeah, no, I mean, whatever. Which, not really that big of a deal, but I was mildly insulted by the fact that the movie thought that was something that it pulled the wool over my eyes with.
Oh, yeah, I see what you mean.
But other than that, that's really a benign problem with the movie. Overall, it's fine. My biggest issue is that the dystopia didn't really feel that big of a deal when he gets rescued by.
Except for the friggin' concentration camp. That's kind of a big deal.
Well, there's inside the corporation.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, but sure, but that felt
by this corporation, which somehow has the legal ability to do that.
But that felt disingenuous to the rest of the film. Like, she's like, "Hey, welcome to the Resistance," and I was like, "Oh, cool." This corporation uses debt to sort of enslave people into working for them, which is, that sucks. But I didn't really get this sense of a cohesive dystopian universe, nor did I get this consistent sense of danger in the universe. I mean, there's a point where a guy goes to a farmer's market and buys vegetables, and there's no sense of danger except that the corporation's drones are following him. And they're only doing that because they hate this one fucking kid. And if I had no stake in the Oasis or anything at all, I have nothing to worry about. There's no consistency or reason to truly be tense about this universe.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think the main thing and one of the gists that they have is a lot of people they do their day job in the Oasis, and so the Oasis is hard to even avoid, for other reasons. So that's something I think was kind of made clear there. But either way,
but it didn't really cohere with the real world. Like, there wasn't this. It just didn't come together for me in a way that a dystopian universe should really make me frightened for the future.
So I'm going to go ahead and throw out one little touch in the movie that I thought was actually a very fun twist on a very sophomoric joke, which is the nut shot.
Yeah, that was pretty good.
Where, he gets kicked in the nuts in the virtual world, and the first thing he does when he gets out of the virtual world is he tears the crotch pad off of his suit, because it's like, yeah, that's not going to happen again. It's like, he spent all this money on all this expensive technology to, feel everything around him. And, well,
including in the nuts.
Yeah.
I do wish Ben Mendelsohn's character in the Oasis was a little bit more menacing than just a big dude in a business suit.
Yeah, he kind of looked like a muscled George Clooney.
I guess that does kind of work in terms of, his password was Boss Man 69. So
What?
that kind of like his avatar being a muscular businessman makes sense. So that's not really that big of a deal. It also took me an embarrassingly long amount of time to figure out who played Wade's abusive stepdad.
Oh,
the bad guy from the hurricane heist.
Yeah.
And he's also in Game of Thrones, apparently. But
right.
I was like, who the fuck is that guy? Where have I seen it before?
All right, well, we're going to go ahead and I don't have a clever segue.
Wait a minute. I have a perfect segue, which is that last week I started watching Silicon Valley, which I recommend both of you do if you haven't already.
I already have.
It's pretty good, but so here's why this is a segue, because of the complaint about references in Ready Player One. And I've been doing a lot of thinking about Silicon Valley and how it is like in the Big Bang Theory, and how like one is lesser than the other. The Big Bang Theory makes references. The Big Bang Theory puts that shit onto its characters. Well, he loves Green Lantern. He loves Batman. Star Wars, Star Trek. Will Wheaton's here. Silicon Valley does not do that shit. In fact, not in one episode of that show in 5 seasons so far has any of the characters expressed any interest in a comic book, a movie, nothing like that. It is just focused on doing characters and telling a story. Now, I do kind of have some issues, but at the same, like, I don't know how like in depth we want to get with this discussion. I know Ken wants to talk about different movies.
I'm just waiting for the segue part of this.
This is the segue part of this. I'm saying, like, compared to the Big Bang Theory and them throwing out references as sort of lifelines, I guess, to nerds like us. We reference Green Lantern in our stupid ass fucking what's his name? What's the guy's name that the show runs? The 2.5 Men guy, Chuck Lorre. Chuck Lorre. His name is Chuck Lorre. Big Bang Theory is fucking atrocious. I don't know if you've ever actually watched, like, sat through an entire episode of it.
I do not like the Big Bang Theory, and I do not wish to talk about it.
I wish to talk about it just to prove.
I have never seen an episode in my life. I've seen like a scene here and there when it was on someone's TV.
There's a very direct
person for it, because
there's a very
I've also
direct.
never seen a full episode of 2.5 Men. I mean,
both are fucking cancer.
Yes.
So,
however, there's a point here.
Okay, let's get to it.
The direct correlation between the Big Bang Theory and Silicon Valley, in the fact that they are both shows about nerds who know a lot about computers. Good God, like you could not like a kid made a shitty little one tower sandcastle versus like artistic integrity and somebody really working on their sandcastle and making it look very great. That's a weird analogy.
Yeah, I was gonna say, do you go up to children on the beach and say,
I do not approach strange children ever. I have never done that. However, my point is that as I was thinking about this, because it did occur to me as I was watching Silicon Valley, I was like, oh, this is the kind of thing that the Big Bang Theory wants to be, but they're just like, we're a laugh track sitcom. We make fucking stupid jokes for stupid people. And it really hit me hard that the Big Bang Theory is very heavy on references. I don't think they mentioned Star Wars or Star Trek once in Silicon Valley. Can you back me up on this, Hawk?
I think they do a Trek reference later on in season 1.
I don't remember it, and I've rewatched it twice at this point. You could be right. I'm not disputing that, but the lack of references in Silicon Valley is really refreshing compared to a show like The Big Bang Theory, where it's like, we're representing nerd culture. Here's a shit ton of references. Silicon Valley is not concerned with that. It's like, we're writing our show. We're focused on our world that we've created. The characters do not reference things on that show.
All right. In the effort to make an actual segue here, I'm going.
That was a good segue. That was a good segue.
Segue into what?
Yeah. Bill, a segue is supposed to lead to.
I don't know. All right. What are we talking about? The Holocaust.
Sergeant Stubby.
Sergeant. What? Who?
So, I'll just jump into it. So, first of all, people who've frequented the theaters in the last couple of months may have seen a trailer for this movie.
I've got a tangent.
All right.
Speaking of nostalgia.
Oh boy. What is it?
For war.
For war?
Yeah. What?
Okay. All right.
Here's a movie that Ken watched.
What's it called?
Go ahead, Ken.
Oh, he made the segue. You're
I
set up. What is Sergeant Stubby?
I'm just gonna say, Hawk, that was actually worse than Bill's segue.
No, they're both they're both movies that take place a long time ago.
At least Bill's had some conversation involved.
Oh no.
Oh wait, no, I said that it takes place a long time ago. No, Ready Player One takes place in the future, but is a long time ago because Sergeant Stubby is kind of nostalgic for movies made in that time. Yes, am I wrong?
Is it like a modern propaganda film, or like a modern day Patton?
Okay, so let's get this started. So, so Sergeant Stubby: An American Hero is a computer animated movie that is about. It's actually based on the true story of Stubby, this little dog, a Boston Terrier, who became the mascot for the 102nd Infantry Regiment during World War I.
That sounds like a terrible premise for a CG animated film. I'm just like at face value. If you were to like,
and actually, you're okay in believing that because everything leading up to this movie's release told me that this was going to be one of those low budget, like it even has the animation style of like those low budget French movies that were redubbed and sold in the US as like an American movie.
Oh, like Top Cat?
Well, not that bad.
Was it Will Ashton and I were talking about this movie, and we thought that this movie has the very distinct look of an animated film that the studio just was kind of like auditing their inventory and like, wow, shit, I forgot we made this. Let's put it out.
Well, first of all, this wasn't a studio film; it was an independently produced movie.
Oh no, and that's even worse.
The studio behind it is, as far as I can tell, they don't appear to have made that much else, and it was co-produced by Micros Image, who appears to have done some animation work on the Captain Underpants movie. Which was and The Little Prince, actually.
Oh my god,
that's both really good credits.
Yes.
And what's interesting about this movie is the director of the film, a guy named Richard Lanny. When you look at his film credits, literally the only thing that you see is he's done writing and directing a handful of war documentaries, and it turns out that he's actually more of a historian than anything. And
that bodes well for this movie.
How did he get involved in this?
It's just as far as I can, I haven't been able to find that much information about the background of the production of the film, other than the fact that that the director, he was compelled by this story. And if you read the Wikipedia page about the actual Sergeant Stubby, the dog, it is kind of fascinating because the dog holds the record for being the most highly decorated service animal in the military. I'll just give you a few actual bits from the Wikipedia page. In one instance, the dog warned of an incoming gas attack because it was able to sense the gas attack and saved civilians in a city near adjoining the trenches. He regularly saved lives because he was able to detect artillery fire long before human ears could hear it. and he could also detect when it was coming their way. He was known for digging up bodies that had been buried in rubble, and in many cases finding people who weren't actually dead but probably would have been if they were left in there for very long. Stubby served in the intelligence corps and helped and actually helped gather intelligence. I'm not sure how it happened, but they credit him with that.
Yeah, let's make a film for children.
The dog was given 2 posthumous Purple Hearts for the 2 injuries he had during the war, including hand grenade shrapnel.
Oh, so he died?
Yeah, well, he died a few years after the war. He actually lived for he died in 1926. So he lived for 9 years after the war ended.
Hawk, hawk, hawk. All dogs go to heaven.
So anyway, they actually so there's a lot of really interesting actual facts about this dog, and the movie, despite the fact that everything going into this made me think that this movie was going to be garbage, I held true to one thing, in that I like history stuff, and the fact that the director was involved in history tells me that he may at least have an interesting take on this. And it turns out that this movie is actually pretty good. It's by no means like Pixar quality in storytelling, but it depicts the history of this dog very well. It has one thing that I was really impressed by. It is this movie is a wonderful introduction to World War I for like elementary school students, because it deals with with the military action. It deals with some basic facts about the war. It deals with the horrors of war in a way that is not shocking to children. It actually is like it reminds me a lot of when I was a kid. There was this cartoon that I used to watch every Christmas. I think it's like a 7-minute short, Peace on Earth. Have you ever heard of this?
Yeah.
Yeah, and it very much is similar in that it's an introduction to the horrors of war through the eyes of a cartoon made for children, and it doesn't get gruesome. You don't see like blood or anything, but you do see a great deal of, you see the toll that war takes on people, and death is an ever-present feeling in even though this is not, so you will never see someone shot on screen in this movie. You don't see any bodies that are actually dead, for instance, but you see a lot of wounded. And as an introduction to children, as the concept of how horrible war is, I was actually impressed with how it was handled. Gerard Depardieu plays a French soldier who joins alongside the American Corps and is a very entertaining character, and I liked his voice performance. Logan Lerman as the main character is less compelling. Really,
as Logan Lerman does.
Well,
I honestly thought you were going to say like a comedian as the dog. Like,
no, the dog is
like Louis C.K.
I was going to say T.J. Miller, but you're on the right path there.
Yeah, the dog does not talk. Thankfully, that would have, I think, been counterproductive. Now
hold up though. That, can we just take a minute and talk about how remarkable that is? You've made a film for children in 2018 that focuses on an animal that doesn't talk.
Not only that, but you made a movie in 2018 that is dealing with events that took place in 1918.
Yes, obviously, and that goes without saying.
You're dealing with it from a very mature level, but you're not talking down to children. You are just simply presenting kind of an understandable. You're basically approaching it from their. You're depicting this very compelling story in history in a respectable way, and there are some elements in it that do that are your typical Hollywood things. You do have, for instance, the French character in this that Gerard Depardieu plays is basically he represents the French people in general, and so he talks about a lot of French things, but that's, you know,
We've come a long way since The Little Mermaid and
Right.
that French chef that was trying to cook Sebastian.
Exactly. Oh God, we've come a long way from Sebastian. Yeah. Ultimately, the film is not without its flaws. It was made for $25 million, and it does have, for low budget CG animation, it has some flaws. The animation quality is serviceable. I had no problem with the actual animation quality. The voice acting, they probably could have spent a little bit more money on. Some of the voice acting is fine, but there's some. Well, okay. The one that kind of bugs me the most is there's this drill sergeant character who's ever present in the film, and the voice is just so obviously a person trying to do this voice.
Well, I was going to say, was Arlie Army like holding out on them? Did they offer him the job?
Well, I mean,
I know he just passed away. Rest in peace.
Yeah.
Well, maybe he was a Trump guy, so maybe not rest in peace, but
I think Ermi would have been, his voice would have been distracting in this movie, honestly. But they could have gotten some of the voice acting could have been a little bit better. But that said, I would say, you know, if you are someone who is very interested in educating your children and showing them an entertaining movie that will kind of introduce them to history, this is a wonderful movie for that. I legit want to lobby for this movie to be shown in like elementary school classrooms because it's entertaining. It's got great history in it, and it's not overly scary or anything. But at the same time, it respects the realities of war in a very real way.
I will seek this out and I will watch this based on what you have just said to me. I don't know about all that. Just because I'm thinking, like, for me, being historically accurate is not my top priority. I'm more just like, I want to watch a movie that is entertaining for all audiences.
And it is an entertaining movie. I found it compelling. You know, it's not.
It sounds like it's pretty good. You've talked it up. You've really given it a decent pedigree. And don't get me wrong. If I were to watch this movie, I would definitely keep that in mind, that the people behind it were very educated on the historical facts.
Now, if you want to examine how this movie's been received by other people, just so you know, the cinema score for this movie was an A. And that means that audiences who went there tended to enjoy it. And it still currently has an 83% on Rotten Tomatoes. And that's...
So I will concede that this is the highest rated Rotten Tomatoes film of the weekend. I call shenanigans on the cinema score because that is a bullshit metric.
Well, here's the thing. Cinema score is good for one thing, and that is popcorn munching audience appreciation of a film.
Whoa.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't...
But not like actual quality, like... Any film that has nuance, the cinema score is like F, hated it, didn't get it, it's a bad movie.
And I agree with you. And I'm not. The thing is, this isn't a movie that you go into looking for that sort of nuance. But as far as like from a degree of did people enjoy it, that's what I'm saying.
Right. And
sure.
Based on what you have said about the film, I don't think that I would personally like take the general audience's opinion into consideration, because it's just like...
Now, another thing I'll mention is the movie's like 75 minutes long, so it doesn't waste a minute of your time.
Yeah, that's not that long.
Yeah, it's about as long as like a direct to video like DC animated movie, and I would argue probably this probably would have been more well suited to, you know, a VOD release. But honestly, I'm glad I saw it in the theater because I got to see parents took their children to this, and it sounded like they were engaged through the entire film.
Nice.
That's good. Yeah, that's really awesome. That kind of relates, not to go off on a huge tangent here, but like what I had said about the Emoji Movie in my worst of list, like just how some of these movies that come out directed at children seem very cynical, and they don't have anything in mind other than profit.
Sure, and this movie is the antithesis to cynical.
Thank you.
These kids' movies don't give enough credit to kids and what they're going to like and be engaged in.
Mm-hmm.
It depends on their age, but yes, I completely agree with you. That's kind of my whole point. Is I so push and support stuff like this because there's so many people out there that release entertainment for children that really their end goal is just to make money, to profit, and like these kids are going to grow up drawing and possibly becoming animators themselves. Inspire them, give them great characters, give them great stuff to get excited about. You know?
War.
Well,
essentially, yeah. I don't know. Like I know I'm kind of rambling here, but
this movie does not glorify war in any way, shape, or form.
Right.
It very much hits.
You described in your review. You had said that this kind of does portray like there are people you see get injured and stuff like that.
Oh yeah, absolutely. You see people get injured, and really what it depicts trench warfare as basically living your life on the edge, where at any time something could happen to you that would snatch your life away. And
right.
It does that within the context of a film that is accessible to children, and I find that deeply impressive. Now, is this like a favorite movie of the year for me? I doubt it'll wind up in my top 10, but I guarantee this is going to be on my honorable mentions list. I'm a history buff, and a movie that manages to introduce children to how to
who's eating a bag of chips?
Sorry, no, it's not a bag of chips. I'm gonna mute my mic.
It's a Joe bag of donuts.
It's it's marijuana.
Ah,
all right, cool.
Okay. Well,
all right.
Good luck with all that.
Come get me, Delaware police.
Can I just say that I live in Illinois? I am not in the same room as these people. All right. We'll go ahead and move on from there. And this movie, I'll get out of the way just because I don't really have all that much to say about it, because Beirut is just kind of it's another.
Want to talk about it?
I really don't, but I have to. I saw it, so I feel like I at least have to. Okay, so Beirut.
I mean, for what it's worth, I don't care all that much about this movie besides the fact that John Hamm is in it, and I like John Hamm. But
and John Hamm.
Everybody likes John Hamm.
I mean, who doesn't like John Hamm?
John Hamm in this movie is so like he's trying, but sadly his character that he was clearly stunt cast here as playing the functioning alcoholic businessman.
Yeah, sure. So it's like oh, he was a madman. He'll be great for this movie.
So the difference
didn't that happen with that baseball movie he was in, $1 Million Arm?
Yeah,
I mean, it happens for like 90% of John Hamm movies.
That's unfortunate. Yeah. Okay, I'm sorry. Continue.
So Beirut, John Hamm plays he plays sort of a political negotiator. He's really good at getting people what they need. Hostage negotiation is one thing that he deals in, but he also deals in things like serving as a mediator between warring factions, things like that. And he during the Lebanese Civil War, or just before Lebanese Civil War, an incident occurred in which his adopted son was snatched away by the adopted son's older brother, who turned out to be alive and living as a terrorist. And in the process of the older brother kidnapping the younger brother back, John Hamm's wife is murdered. And the movie fast forwards 10 years in the future, and he's living in he's no longer doing the political stuff. He's now mediating for like unions in, you know, middle of the road US, and drinking himself into oblivion. And he's drafted back in. It's the 80s now, and he's drafted into a situation where he finds out that a friend of his has been kidnapped by the son that the adopted son that he once loved. And yeah, the problem with this movie is the script. So Will Ashton cleared up some very important things for me when he said that this script was apparently originally written in the early 90s. It completely feels like a script from the early 90s, because there's a total pre-9/11 sensibility to the way it depicts terrorism. And it feels so out of place in a modern movie. John Hamm does his best with what he has. Rosamund Pike is just there. She has nothing to do in this movie.
I do want to point out, if that is true, and the studio has been sitting on this script from the 90s, and what you saw is how they, they got the finished product and they said, yeah, this is okay, release it in 2018.
What else we got?
Yeah, exactly. It's like, wow, like this is the best. I don't know the context of what you're describing, but it does sound like they could have done better to update the datedness of this script. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, the trailer was criticized widely in social media for having a white savior narrative, and that's fortunately it's not true, because white people don't save shit in this movie. So that's at least something. But this is just mediocre, the definition of it. The script, by the way, was from Tony Gilroy, who,
ooh,
yeah,
that's usually a good thing.
Yeah, he wrote and directed Michael Clayton, which is a good thing. He wrote, but he also wrote The Great Wall, being fair, and he wrote Rogue One for whatever. He wrote The Bourne Legacy, but he did write the good Bourne movies too.
Yeah.
So I would say he's kind of hit and miss, with Michael Clayton being a particularly high career point.
He casts a wide net.
Yes. And Beirut is... I wouldn't be surprised if this is a script he wrote long before he wrote his good scripts. That's all I got to say about that, unless you have any questions.
Nah, not really.
Yeah.
Nope.
So Bill,
on to a movie we actually want to talk about.
Yeah, Bill, truth or dare?
He's sorry. No, I'm here. I'm here.
Yeah.
No. I'm here. What is this? High school? Like, so this is called Blumhouse's Truth or Dare.
All right. So yeah.
So you screwed up my bit.
I'm honestly more interested in hearing the history behind that decision than I am about the contents of the film. But who knows? Maybe the film is good. I really don't know.
It's not
anything. Okay.
But it's basically, I talked before we went live. I mentioned there's a reason why it's called Blumhouse's Truth or Dare. That's because in October of last year, Sci-Fi aired a movie called Truth or Dare, which has a really fucking similar premise to this movie. So I think this actually boils down to a kind of like, every few years you get a pair of films that come out that have very similar premises. You have like The Illusionist versus The Prestige, White House Down versus Olympus Has Fallen. And a lot of times you have studios, you have kernels of a movie idea that one studio doesn't make, and then the person ships it off to a different studio, but then the first studio decides to make it. And I don't know how rights actually work with this, but what it comes down to is that two studios make make similar movies off of the same original idea. And
do you guys
this situation, I think
potentially this probably happened before this, but when Jeffrey Katzenberg left Disney, DreamWorks released Ants, and Pixar came out with A Bug's Life.
Mm-hmm. Well, that was a little bit different because Ants was not a similar movie made around the same time. Ants was the answer to A Bug's Life.
But that's what I'm saying is that because yes. Huh? In a sense, I mean, you're making a pun, but you're right. Like
no, actually that was a convenient pun. No, but Ants was literally the response to A Bug's Life. That was, oh, you made a lot of money off of Bug's Life. Well, here's our Ant movie.
I thought they were in development. Like
Ants actually got
simultaneously.
Released first.
Yeah.
What?
Ants came out first.
Yes.
Really?
Yeah. But they were in production simultaneously.
It was a direct correlation to Jeffrey Katzenberg leaving Disney and going to DreamWorks.
Well, I'm certain I read somewhere that Ants was kind of a fuck you to Pixar Disney.
Pixar and Disney were developing A Bug's Life, and Jeffrey Katzenberg felt like it was involved in that in some way. Whether he was or not, I don't know. I wasn't there. But as far as I know, he felt some kind of ownership of this idea. So he went to DreamWorks and said, listen, we're going to make a movie about bugs, and we're going to beat Disney to market with it. Straight up Gavin Belson shit.
So that's one example. I think that this was more of a matter of two studios making a similar premise off of the same original concept, and then Sci-Fi, of course, beat Blumhouse to it. So now since it's been less than 7 months since the Sci-Fi movie, Blumhouse had to brand their film, which of course could also be a matter of Blumhouse trying to be a little more brand forward in their films.
Right.
Which is unfortunate that they chose this movie to do it with.
I agree. I don't know the movie, but I think after Get Out, Blumhouse really wants to make their studio's name more prominent.
Yeah. Which is, I mean, again, it's great that they chose this movie to do it because you have Get Out, which is so full of nuance and detail.
Right.
Truth or Dare is so full of shit and more shit. But basically what this movie revolves around is there is these college kids go on a spring break in Mexico, and the main character, Olivia, she meets this guy at a bar, and he's like, hey, let's go up to this creepy ass church that's totally not cursed with your friends, and let's hang out.
Surprise, it's cursed.
Yeah, right. And then while they're there, they start playing Truth or Dare, and it finally comes to this guy, and they're like, Truth. It's like, truth is, I wanted to find a vulnerable girl who had friends that I could bring up here because I would rather they die instead of me. And
if one of them had just been like Bye Bye Man, and this was a secret sequel to Bye Bye Man, then that like opens up a whole world of possibilities in which that you could improve this.
Well, it's interesting because I posted on Facebook that the Truth or Dare is one of the most idiotic horror movies I've seen since the Bye Bye Man. And
right.
A friend of mine commented like, well, do these movies take themselves seriously? And it's ironic because both this movie, Truth or Dare, and the Bye Bye Man take themselves very seriously in the sense that these movies feel like they are pioneering a whole new series of revolutionary horror film. Because the Bye Bye Man last year was touted as this, like, oh, this is the new Slender Man, dude.
Who said that? Who said that?
The director of the film, probably.
Oh God. Okay. Well,
I mean, you shouldn't say that, but if you haven't seen the Bye Bye Man, Bill, you should because it's a.
No, I have. It was on my worst of list.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. good,
I'm
and
a
it was
fan.
fucking hilarious.
Yes, it's fun. It's a lot of fun.
It's fun because it takes itself so seriously.
Yes, and it does really ridiculous shit that would be laughed at in any context.
And that's the great thing about Truth or Dare is that if you change, like even more so than I can't remember what I watched a couple weeks ago or a couple months ago, but even more so than that film, a couple of very choice edits and maybe a little bit of change in the sound design and score. That's all you have to change. If this movie Truth or Dare was changed 5 degrees from what it was, this would work as a straight horror comedy.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So anyway, in this story, you know, it's Truth or Dare, and it's like blah, 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 blah,
Truth or
blah,
Dare,
and then
Truth or Dare,
and it unleashes a demon where certain characters all of a sudden they will see. This is one of the fun. This is part of what makes the movie so funny. Is in the first time this actually happens officially, is that Olivia is standing in the library and she turns around and looks at a friend of hers or someone across the library, and their face distorts into this horrible Snapchat filter lens where their mouth curls up super high into this huge smile and their eyes get super big. There's like, whooshing, there's this horror movie sound. Whooshing, Truth or Dare, Olivia. And
what the fuck?
Yeah, and she has to say truth, and then all of a sudden, all these like 15 people in the library with the same face crowd in on her and say truth or dare, truth, and then she blurts out some horrible truth about her friend and roommate that she's cheating on her boyfriend. And the thing is that this demon makes you say truth or dare, and whichever one you choose, you have to say the truth, the true truth.
You have to do the dare.
You have to do the dare, and if you don't, you die. And that's the thing. That's all it is.
It's in the film, in the context of the film, it's a demon.
Yeah,
that enforces this. Like,
yeah.
So, oh man, I would love to see like a 90s Spawn movie scene where like the devil is talking to this demon and he's like, listen, these teenagers are going to play truth or dare, but you have to enforce it. You got to make sure if they say truth, they tell the truth, and if they say dare, you gotta make them do real fucked up stuff.
Well, you know, in a horror movie fashion, modern horror movie fashion, like I think if this movie was made in like the 80s, they would just let it be. But because this is a modern film that they want to make a franchise out of, there's actually a backstory to the demons. Like, oh, these, you know, so-and-so trashed this church and unleashed this demon, and now it haunts people playing the truth or dare game for some goddamn reason.
That is so ridiculous.
It is. There is so much to laugh at in this movie, and I'll mention a couple of them that really made me laugh. Then I'll let Ken talk about it a bit because I've been riffing on it for a second.
Right.
There's a sequence where one of the characters who is she's a pretty good day drinker, and this is actually one of the more creative sequences in the movie, but it's executed very, very poorly. This movie is directed by Jeff Wadlow, who did Kick-Ass 2.
Right, and I when Kick-Ass 2 came out, I stole a quote from Red Letter Media, and I said, instead of directing Kick-Ass 2, Jeff Wadlow should have been directing people to their seats in the theater. And that's a harsh, but like, yeah, Kick-Ass 2, that was just a huge disappointment.
It was an awful movie in very poor taste, which is partly owed to Mark Millar, but that's neither here nor there. And he also made True Memoirs of an International Assassin with
he
Kevin
directed that?
James. Yeah, he did.
My mother, I was watching like Stranger Things or something with my mother, and then like after it was over, it was like True Memoirs of a Nationalist, and my mom was like, "Oh, I love Kevin James. I love King of Queens. Can you put that on for me?" And I put it on, and I fell asleep within like 5 minutes of it.
I shut it off within like 10. Yeah, it's not.
It was so stupid. It's just like bland. Like, oh, who's watching this?
Yeah, it really is. But anyway, in this sequence, this girl's her. Go ahead.
No, I'll never mind. Keep going.
He's very butthurt over the fact that we're making entertainment here. So
This girl's boyfriend had died earlier in the movie, and she's really really drunk, and then she gets up out of her bed and she finds a bottle of vodka in her dresser, and she looks in the mirror, and the movie she has to choose dare, because it's like the movie explains it later. Like after two truths, you have to have a dare. So she has a dare, and her dare is she has to take the bottle of vodka with her and walk along the roof of their shared house, and walk around the roof of the shared house until she has finished the bottle of vodka, which in concept is kind of a creative setup for a sequence. And so, they find out she's doing that, and then the friends they bring a mattress out, and they're carrying it underneath the roof to catch her if she tumbles off the roof. And this is where it got really funny, is that they get to this part where there's this really heavy iron fence with like pointy spikes on the top of it. They're like, oh my god, this is the fence, and they try to hoist the mattress over the fence, and in seconds, the fence just tears through the mattress. And it's just like this womp womp, and like you just get this sense where it's like, whoops, they fucked up. And like there's so many moments in this movie that should be funny if the movie didn't take itself so fucking seriously.
Oh yeah, that's really the crux of things, is that this movie wants to be so important, and it is anything but that. It is hot garbage.
Is it pompous?
No.
How does it make it feel itself important? Or, you know what I mean? How does it want to be?
It kind of
regarded as important.
It angles itself as the next classic horror movie franchise.
Yeah.
Oh boy. Because even Annabelle got a sequel.
And the Annabelle sequel was really fucking good.
I've heard, yeah, that's great. I've heard that the sequel was better than the original, and
a lot of things are better than the original.
Well, are they?
Extra Crispy's better than original recipe.
Annabelle creation is pretty great. I would say that.
All right. So Blumhouse, I think it's safe to say that we're kind of a fan of Blumhouse as a crew. They made that wonderful J-Lo film, The Boy Next Door.
Yeah.
That was hilarious. I can't stop thinking about it.
How about Get Out?
They made Get Out. Yeah. Well, they
Oscar winning Get Out.
Let's be fair. The way that you phrase that sentence is Blumhouse allowed Jordan Peele to make Get Out.
Yeah.
Blumhouse produced a Jordan Peele film for which he won an Oscar for his screenplay that was originally unrelated. Jordan Peele wrote a script for which Blumhouse picked up, and then he won an Oscar for that screenplay.
How
about Blumhouse bankrolled that movie?
They gave
Blumhouse.
They were the financiers, but
Blumhouse has no business taking credit for that Oscar win. Is what I'm saying.
Didn't Blumhouse produce Whiplash?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean, these guys are just gambling, I feel like.
Well,
they do seem to have a predilection towards horror.
It's the Roger Corman method. Make movies fast, make movies cheap, and find people who are hungry. And that's
my God, you're right.
Yeah.
Jason Blum is the modern day Roger Corman.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I mean, Truth or Dare made $23 million worldwide.
Oh my God.
As this weekend on a $3.5 million budget. It's gonna get a sequel.
Oh my God, this is amazing.
And being fair, I will say this, Hawk, there are potentials for the sequel. Because
the ending for this movie sets up it lays the groundwork really, really well for a sequel.
So let me just spoil it, because you're not going to see it for a while, if at all, Bill, are you?
Nah,
maybe I'd watch it if you guys say that it's like funny, entertaining.
I will say that knowing the ending for the film will not spoil.
I don't care. I don't care about spoilers practically. Like, it's rare that I care about spoilers. So,
all right. Well,
what do you got?
So basically, the movie, the main character in this film has her own YouTube channel, and the movie makes this big deal out of how, out of the way to reverse this truth or dare curse. And at the end of the movie, they fuck it up and they make it impossible to actually reverse the curse. But one thing about the truth or dare thing is about the curse is it's one at a time. So everyone has a single turn. And you don't have to do the truth or dare bullshit until your turn comes up. So they come up with an idea that's going to extend their own lives, but also fuck the lives of basically the rest of the planet. Her popular YouTube channel, she basically tells the entire world truth or dare.
And then that delays her turn indefinitely.
Right, because everyone who sees this video, which is guaranteed to go viral, is suddenly going to be faced by with having to answer the question to this friggin' demon. Anyway, which I thought was, it's corny, but there's potential there to extend the story and actually it's far more interesting, I think, than the potential for sequelizing is far more interesting to me than I normally would have thought, given the quality of the movie otherwise.
It's a great way to expand the ending. I kind of would equate it. I just thought of this. I would kind of equate it as I would. It blows up the concept and the potential for a sequel in the way that Skyline evolved into Beyond Skyline. Which I mean, you guys have heard me talk about Beyond Skyline at length. But the first Skyline is probably one of the worst movies I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah,
and Beyond Skyline has a scope and ambition that is so far beyond what that first movie did that it is an absolute delight. And I think that the sequel to Truth or Dare has a similar level of ambition and kind of like, you know what, fuck it, this is this big now. It'll be a lot of fun.
Yeah, so I legitimately would be interested to see what they do. And
yeah, I mean, apparently there's a sequel to Unfriended now.
Yeah,
have you heard about this?
No, I haven't. I did not know that the sequel was greenlit. I haven't watched Unfriended. I should watch Unfriended.
No, you shouldn't. It's terrible. But the sequel to Unfriended is unrelated, as far as I know. But
I feel like I would laugh if I watched it.
My understanding is that it was a completely different film, and they just slapped the Unfriended moniker on it.
That makes sense given the premise, but apparently this guy, he acquires a secondhand laptop, and he's like using it and stuff, and he starts getting notifications and emails directed towards the previous user of the laptop, who apparently was this big, like he was coordinating assassinations of people or something like that. He basically gets sucked into some really dark shit because this secondhand laptop was owned by a really fucked up person. So that sounds really cool. But in any case, the sequel to Truth or Dare, I think if they expand the scale and the way that the ending implies, I will totally be on board for that movie.
All right. Well, so last up on our list to discuss today, tell us all about Rampage.
All right, so I just submitted my review for Rampage. It was a little bit late, but I had a busy week. But I ended up giving it 3 beers as opposed to 4.
Okay.
And in my verdict, I indicated that this movie is a little bit more difficult to dislike the more you think about it, because it really plays it fast and loose with its own logic and world and lore, of which it has almost none of all of that.
Okay.
I will also say that this is the best video game movie of 2018 so far.
Okay. So I've heard some people say it's the best video game movie ever. What is your thought to that?
It is one of the best video game movies ever.
Which says so little.
it says so little, but it also says a lot, because part of what makes it one of the best video game movies ever is that it is not beholden to its video game roots. It has references here and there.
Do you consider Wreck-It Ralph a video game movie?
No. A video game movie, for the purposes of our definition, is a movie that is directly based on a specific existing video game.
So not The Wizard, not Gamer.
Nope.
Right, I mean, because if you're
those are movies about video games.
If you're going to count movies about video games, Tron would probably be high on that list.
It's a good hero's journey execution, Tron.
When I say video game movie, I mean a movie that is based on a sole existing video game IP.
Exactly.
Yes,
and it's an adaptation of a thing, not based on something, not encompassing anything. We took a video game and made a movie out of it.
Well, this is a discussion for a different time. Let's talk about Rampage.
So I actually this will actually give me a chance to talk about Tomb Raider as well a little bit, because the reason that I think Rampage succeeds for me is how Tomb Raider failed for me. Is that, first of all, in my review, I gave Tomb Raider a full 6-pack. I fucking hated it. It is, first of all, like Ken pointed out, it's basically The Last Crusade, Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. Second of all, Tomb Raider is, in a sense, the newer game that it's based on, not quite so much, but Tomb Raider as a property is kind of wacky. It's about an explorer who gets into crazy supernatural situations, raiding tombs, killing bad guys, really fun stuff. And the Tomb Raider movie took itself way too goddamn seriously. Like, this movie is way up its own ass in terms of being an adventure film when it did nothing new or fresh at all whatsoever. Rampage has a profound lack of seriousness that is absolutely infectious. The way it kind of plays it fast and loose with itself, it kind of hurts it as well, because up until the final act, it's kind of disinterested in itself. But I'll get into that. Basically, this is Dwayne Johnson, and he is best friends with an albino gorilla, and they do sign language, and they're best buddies. And Dwayne Johnson's character is just, he connects more with animals than he does with humans, and nobody really cares about all that stuff. Way up in space, this company is doing these experiments, which are really left not all that detailed. Part of the problem of this movie, and part of what makes it fun, is that the villain plot is really just touched on and kind of just left there.
Mm-hmm. I've heard a lot of people say that the villains weren't particularly engaging.
You remember back in like the 80s and 90s where you had this villain dynamic where you have the main villain who's really conniving and you have the hench person who is just a fucking idiot?
Yes.
It's exactly that dynamic.
Okay.
It's actually a brother and sister team. The sister is Malin Ackerman, and the brother is Luke. I don't remember who he is, but he was in The Office for a couple minutes. The sister is like the really conniving evil one, and the brother is this fucking moron. Even to the point where, like, I'm getting ahead of myself, but when the creatures are really huge and they're evil and stuff, they have this satellite device where it's going to call the monsters to Chicago, where they're at on the Willis Tower. And I can't remember what her exact line was, but she's like, "Oh, this is what we're going to do next." He's like, "Oh, is it the device?" And she's like, "Yeah." And he's like, "Yes." And like everything that this brother does, he's just a fucking moron. He's afraid of everybody, and he's stupid, and he's just stomped over by everybody. And again, it's the smart villain and idiotic hench person dynamic that those action movies had back in the day, which as its own core thing is kind of funny, but in the movie itself doesn't really function within everything else. Anyway, they're doing this experiment up in space. In the opening sequence, the satellite crashes, and these different canisters rocket down to Earth, and they're opened up and absorbed by this Dwayne Johnson's best buddy, the albino gorilla, and a crocodile and a wolf. The three main characters of the original Rampage. What follows in the next hour of film doesn't really matter that much because it's all building towards the climax in Chicago where the monsters are climbing on buildings and tearing things apart and stuff, which is probably the biggest problem with the movie because it's kind of boring up until that ending. With everything building towards that ending, the movie has to have a reason to justify its running time until the big action sequence at the end.
So what you're saying is there isn't a whole lot of big action sequences prior to that?
I mean, there are a couple which are fine. I mean, they're good. There's a sequence on an airplane where George breaks out of his cage in midair and the plane starts to crash, and that was a pretty good sequence. And then there is a sequence where Ralph the Wolf is running through a forest and killing the Special Forces team, which was almost I say identical, and I mean literally identical to the Indominus Rex scene from Jurassic World, right down to there's this Special Forces team in the forest. There is a giant creature tracking them through the forest. Every Special Forces character has a body cam, and the body cams get ripped off piece by piece until the last guy has some drool drip on him and then he gets eaten and killed.
I see.
Like this movie is bizarrely similar to Jurassic World in many respects, which was kind of distracting. Again, it's really hard to like most of this movie. I was honestly quite bored throughout most of it. But then when I got to the ending and I finished the movie and I started thinking about it, it made it, in retrospect, more difficult to dislike because there are a lot of things that you think of and you're like, wow, that was kind of stupid, but the movie doesn't really care about that. And then it brought me to thinking about how this movie relates to something like Transformers, where Transformers also plays it very fast and loose with its own logic, but the difference is that Transformers also has its long-running lore that takes itself very seriously, whereas Rampage doesn't really give a shit. So Lizzie the crocodile is in Louisiana, and it absorbs this space dust, and then all of a sudden it's super giant and in Chicago. And the movie never really questions whether, or it never really questions how Lizzie got all the way from Louisiana to Chicago without anybody noticing it, because when it bursts out of the Chicago Bay, it's a huge surprise.
Yeah. Wait a second. So not only did she sneak her way to Chicago, but she bursts out of friggin' Lake Michigan, which, by the way, saying Chicago Bay, there is no bay. It's just Lake Michigan.
I call it Chicago Bay because that's how the movie frames it.
Do they call it a bay? Because
no, I don't think they do.
If I mean, I'm just gonna say it. Look on a map. There is no bay. It's just there. That is.
I know. It's just like, again, the way it's shot kind of looks more like a bay. I don't know. Maybe I just phrased it poorly, but
no, that's fine. I just didn't know if the movie like called it Chicago Bay, because I was going to say that's not a thing.
I don't think they do, but anyway, very little of the first half of the movie really matters. I honestly found Will Ashton thought that the relationship between Davis and George was the best part of the movie. I thought that was one of the most boring parts because it kind of felt like this thing the movie had to do in order to get to the meat of the climax. At the same time, I kind of admire that the movie took this. It tried to make a narrative out of a game that really doesn't have one. But once it gets to that climax, holy shit, is this movie fun. The last 40 minutes of this movie is absolutely terrific.
I just Googled Chicago Bay to see if it's a thing. There apparently is a Chicago Bay on the north shore of Lake Superior, of all things, in Minnesota. But obviously that's not anywhere near what we're talking about. Sorry.
Actually, you know what? Backtracking really quick. backtracking for a moment, there is a character that I really loved, and that is Jeffrey Dean Morgan as this character
as the
named
serial
Harvey.
leaner.
The serial leaner. He's I mentioned this in my review. He basically, you get the sense that he just wandered off of the Walking Dead set to film his scenes in between the scenes on The Walking Dead, because he has his drawl. He's a total dick. He leans. He has the side eye. This is Negan in The Walking Dead in Rampage.
I've heard some people speculate that, like, as soon as people started making a big deal out of the lean, that he's intentionally gone out of his way to lean even more.
Oh, I believe it. Jeffrey Dean Morgan is the only person in this movie who is having the most fun out of anybody else. He knows exactly what kind of movie he's in. Even Dwayne Johnson has like these moments where he's like very serious.
Mm-hmm.
But nearly every second, Jeffrey Dean Morgan is like leaning and drawling, and it's really, really fun watching him. Especially because in the second half of the movie, he becomes a good guy. Like in the first half, he's kind of an asshole.
Mm-hmm.
But then in the plane sequence where George breaks out of his cage, Davis saves him, and then he's like, hey, Davis, thanks for saving this old cowboy from that plane. I guess I owe you a debt. And stuff like that. Like, I can't do the drawl very well, but it's like that. In any case, when it gets to the climax, this is, like I told you in the chat, everything that you probably imagined when you were playing the game. There's even a sequence where all three of the monsters are climbing the Willis Tower and smashing into it and just climbing up it, and it's fucking awesome.
So, how accurate is the movie to the video game? Like, in the video game, every city was just a cardboard cutout that didn't look anything like the actual city. So, does this look nothing like actual Chicago?
I've never been to Chicago, so I couldn't tell you.
Well, I mean, you already said that the Willis Tower is in there, which, by the way, no one in Chicago calls it the Willis Tower. It's still the Sears Tower.
It's still the Sears Tower, but whatever, Willis, Sears, whatever.
Yeah, no.
However, the for all intents and purposes, the Sears Tower is the MacGuffin of the film because
it's the tallest building, and of course you're gonna have monsters hanging off of it.
Well, because the villainous siblings have this. Okay, here's where the movie kind of lost me, is that the siblings have this kind of plot where they have this satellite type thing that comes out of the Sears Tower, and it sends out this signal that attracts the monsters to it because they want their research back to profit off of it, no matter the cost of human life. It's like, it's not really that well explained. It doesn't really make a lot of sense. So the movie just kind of like, it's like, you know what? Fuck it. It's giant monsters killing things. Who cares? And they're all climbing the tower. And do you remember in the video game where there was the lady in the red dress that you can eat?
Yeah.
That's a direct reference. Like George grabs a lady in a red dress and eats her.
Okay. Well,
this movie isn't super direct in its references, but it's direct in a way that is subtle, if that makes sense. Like, it's not like, oh, remember that part? It's kind of like there are things that people that love the game would recognize.
Fortunately, the game, even the later like sequels, don't exactly have a lot of plot to them.
They don't. No. I
mean,
mean,
monsters that destroy a city. And then when you beat that level, you move on to the next city. The game starts in Peoria and works its way out.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I mean, the movie subsists on references rather than direct adaptations, if that makes sense. Like, I mean, there's Lady in the Red Dress. There's the climbing the buildings. There's in the opening sequence on the space station, you have what's the name of the giant rat?
Do
you remember?
See, here's the thing: the giant rat was in World Tour, wasn't it?
I think so. Yeah.
I only ever played the first Rampage. So
the giant rat is in the opening sequence of the movie in the space station, but really only as kind of like a, if you're watching the movie fresh, you're like, oh, there's a giant rat because this experiment went awry. But if you are watching it as somebody who's played all the games, you're like, oh, that's the fucking rat from World Tour, which doesn't factor into the rest of the film, except for a couple of references because the Malin Akerman's character keeps a small pet rat but it's the really small references to the game that really make this work as a video game movie. It's, again, like
Curtis,
I said at the beginning, it's not beholden to its roots as a video game film. It's a movie first that references a video game second, which might be the secret ingredient to making a good video game film.
Yeah, the lab rat is Curtis, by the way.
Okay, Curtis, yeah.
That's just you asked me what his name was. So.
Yeah. So it really disappoints me to say that at the end of this movie, Dwayne Johnson does not get a whiff of the space dust and grow giant to fight the monsters.
See, that is how the movie should have gone.
It really should have. In fact, for a long, when I went to the movie, I was like, no, that's stupid. It's not going to happen. But towards the climax, I thought it was going to happen because
I've heard that said by a few people.
It feels like the natural progression of the film, because Lizzie the crocodile, she just keeps coming and coming, like to the point where it's one of my favorite shots in the film is that Davis climbs into a grounded military helicopter, and up until that point, George has been fighting her, and she keeps coming back and really doing a number on him. And he unloads the helicopter's entire ordnance on Lizzie, like just fire and brimstone, rockets and machine guns, and like it's like blowing up. And then there's this beat, and then Lizzie comes roaring through the fire cloud at him. And you think, like, okay, now that he's unloaded this entire helicopter's ordnance on her, there's no other thing that can happen that he grows giant also and kicks her ass.
Mm-hmm.
But he doesn't, unfortunately. Which that kind of plays into the thing that Will Ashton and I mentioned about Brad Payton's movies in general, is that they really just graze this great nuttiness in his films, but he never quite reaches it, and we're not sure why, because all of his films have this potential to be really, really fun and crazy because he clearly has his ideas, but it never quite reaches that, whether it's because he doesn't quite want to do that or the studio holds him back. Like, I don't know. It's like, because he did Incarnate and San Andreas, and both films come very, very close to being classically campy films, but they just kind of stop right before getting there.
Yeah, I think I'm ready to see this movie this coming weekend. I think that I finally reached the point where I'm ready. I wanted you to sell me on at least that it would be, that it would have some popcorn appeal to it. So, oh my gosh. Okay, I'm sorry. Not to cut things off with the Rampage review, but just popped up on. Because I was reading an article on Rampage, and the first thing that it links to is apparently Steven Spielberg is about to join the DC universe as a director.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it says here that he is going to adapt the Black Hawk comic. I have no idea what Black Hawk is.
Me neither.
It says here it's a World War II set DC series about a squadron of pilots.
That sounds like a Steven Spielberg movie.
Yeah, it does, actually. That makes total sense.
That makes total sense.
Oh God! Oh no! Oh no! Is this? I'm just reading who wrote the screenplay, and I think I'm. You know what? Wait a second. For a second I was worried, but then I realized no, I'm. It's okay. It's not a problem. David Koepp.
Yeah, no, I'm okay with that.
Yeah, for some reason I confused him with who's that other guy who there's another screenwriter who I'm thinking of, who I don't think Spielberg's worked with him, but whatever. My mind got.
Wait, what did he write?
He does a lot of garbage movies, and people give him credit for it. Shit. Now,
I know who you're talking about.
But what's his goddamn name?
He probably, you know what? I think it's the guy that did the Ready Player One script. Hold on. Now you're making me. It's
Yeah.
not Aaron Kruger, is it?
No. And you're thinking Ernest Cline, the guy from Ready Player One, because he
Ernest Cline wrote the Ready Player One script, but it was Zach Penn.
Oh yeah, no, I'm not thinking Zach Penn.
Okay.
Shit. Why can't I remember?
What are you thinking of in regards to David Koepp?
So
like how is he related?
So it was. I think my brain is completely farted at this point because I seriously can't remember like a single movie that this dude has written, and yet it's one of those names that's like ubiquitous for like garbage screenwriting.
Yeah, we'll think of it.
Yeah.
In any case, Rampage. I will tell you that. I will tell you that. As you're watching it, the first hour or so, it's rough. It's kind of boring. It's not really engaging, and it's kind of a rough watch. But
Damon Lindelof.
Really, that was who you were thinking of?
I can't believe it. I confused. Yeah. For some reason, I was thinking, yeah, I don't know how I confused those two. That's.
Yeah, he sucks.
Yeah. All right, so carry on.
Actually, Damon Lindelof has his issues, but didn't he do Leftovers?
Well, I know he did Lost, which he did the Leftovers. I guess I've never seen
Leftovers is really fucking good, but I also he also wrote Tomorrowland, which is one of my least favorite movies of that year, 2015.
He's written some things that I don't hate, but they all have problems.
Damon Lindelof is a fantastic idea guy.
Maybe, yeah, or maybe someone else is a good idea guy, and he's the one who fucks them up.
Maybe.
So
yeah, no, I love The Leftovers. I fucking hated Tomorrowland. Rampage. Rough starts, but man, does it pay off in the last half hour, because that is a fun ass climax.
Fair enough. I will seek that out. All right. Well, we will see you next week. We have. I don't think anyone here is going to be seeing I Feel Pretty unless you really are planning to. But
yeah, I'll probably see it.
Oh, okay. Well,
so I'll be seeing I Feel Pretty. I will actually, I'm going to be seeing I Feel Pretty. I will definitely be seeing Super Troopers 2. I'll probably watch Traffic because that trailer looks really stupid and really funny.
Yeah, Traffic. It's one of those things where the trailer looks bad, but there's a kernel of an idea in there that could potentially be interesting. And what's funny about it is it's so similar, the way the trailer is presented, to another movie that's coming out that is about this woman defending her children who've been kidnapped from intruders. It's another home invasion
Breaking In.
thriller. Yeah.
I'm actually really excited for Breaking In.
So we'll see how that goes, but I'll probably see at least 2 of those. I might see I Feel Pretty, but I am not the biggest Amy Schumer fan, so it's going to take someone is going to have to tell me that it's a good movie for me to see it.
I don't dislike Amy Schumer's movies. I think her stand-up is awful, but I like her movies.
Something about her performances feel disingenuous to me. But that said, I'm not discounting it altogether. I'm willing to give it another shot. So,
also opening near me is this weekend. I'm getting The Final Portrait.
Ooh, interesting.
And I'm getting You Were Never Really Here.
Now that I gotta find. I'm gonna check and see if any of my theaters are getting indie flicks. I don't think they are this weekend, but we'll see.
I feel I don't know. I think at least in the next week you should be getting You Were Never Really Here.
I will keep a lookout.
But I'm in a film centric area, so I'm probably getting it before you are, but you should be getting it probably a week or two after I do. So do not despair, is what I'm saying.
All right. Well, see you later.
Yeah.
Have a good night.
You too.